In the next section, we're going to talk about some assumptions about feedback and how it works. In this section, we're now going to talk about how feedback works and how it relates to personal and professional development. So let me ask you a few questions. Commonly said that experience is the best teacher. Is it? Many people believe that you develop in a job the longer you're there, and it's a natural process. And a lot of it can't really be learned. True? People learn best from their mistakes. Common adage, is it true? And people are responsible for their own development. This is not a management or leadership responsibility. True? So let's look at these. Experience is the best teacher. I'd say no, not true at all. Experience is not the best teacher. You need experience plus guidance to be able to learn. So coaching, mentoring, job rotation, on-the-job training, stretch assignments with a mentor allows for someone to learn and grow, have experiences, but get feedback. Experience doesn't provide feedback. People do. If you learn from experience, you often don't learn the right lesson. And it may be a trial and error kind of approach. And so what you really want to do with a person for whom you have supervisory responsibility is to continuously process their experiences and provide coaching and guidance along the way. Meaningful challenge is the best teacher? Well, I would say meaningful is that it's personally relevant and there are real personal consequences. That's what makes something meaningful. And that it's challenging if it's a stretch and if there is encouragement to approach things in a new way and in a different way. So again, in a work environment, to the extent that you can give employees meaningful challenges and then help them think through the approaches. That is not to say micromanage them in those approaches, but help them think through their alternatives and provide feedback as they go through the working on the issue. Then you have a meaningful challenge. Benjamin Disraeli talked that one of the elements of feedback is consciousness about your limitations. To be conscious that you're ignorant of facts is a great step towards knowledge. Others talk about consciously competent, consciously incompetent, unconsciously incompetent, and unconsciously competent. And this is simply to say that what we really strive for is conscious competence, that you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. That's, I think, what Disraeli is fundamentally talking about. In a study of 90 top business leaders, Benessenenas talk about it is the capacity to develop and improve their skills that distinguishes leaders from their followers. Successful leaders are successful learners. There is a group in Minneapolis, PSI, that does large-scale corporate development and consulting. They talk about a 360 evaluation where successful leaders will get evaluation both from people to whom they are reporting themselves and everybody who reports to them, that they are always seeking this kind of input on an ongoing basis. Not that you go through this kind of formal evaluation every day or even every year, but you do open yourself up to be formally evaluated by those who work for you as well as those to whom you report. In providing quality feedback, it's important to acknowledge that the individual has specific strengths and that feedback is critical precondition to grow. It would be very worthwhile before going into a feedback session to know what the person wants feedback on. So let me give you again an example. I work in an academic environment and where people give a lot of presentations and talks. One of the things, and I've asked many of my colleagues this and many students, have you ever gotten any feedback on a presentation that you've given? And most people say never, never. I get evaluation, so for example, we get course evaluations, but nobody really says, you talk too fast, you talk too slow, your slides were too crowded, you had a laser pointer that you kept moving around. We rarely get these kind of feedback. And I would suggest the same is true in most work environments. So to ask someone who you supervise, are there areas that you would like me to pay particular attention to? Says this is an environment where you can grow. Be clear when providing feedback, and clarity really means giving examples, being specific. And don't let critical feedback pile up. What happens way too often, because we are reluctant to give feedback, we are what one author referred to as gunny sackers. That is to say, we see something happen and we say, well, this is pretty small. I'm not going to deal with it. So I put it in my gunny sack that I'm carrying on my back. And then weeks later or months later, something else happens. And I say, oh, this is a problem. But I don't really deal with it. I put it there. And then something else happens. And all of a sudden, bang, I explode. And the person that I am, quote, giving feedback to says, what just happened? He was so upset over such a small issue. I don't get it. And what happened was that this small issue was the final example. But because I let these things pile up and didn't address them, they became more problematic. So in providing feedback, as I said earlier, focus on the behavior, not the person, where the behavior is the issue that you want to help improve. See it as an ongoing process and not just once a year we'll have a formal evaluation. But that formal evaluation should have some periodic check-in points as well. You need to own the statements that you make. So if, for example, you have collected data from others, the message still needs to be I messages. So it's not people have told me, but I have observed this, or I have compiled information in meeting with various people around the situation. So if you think about the case that I raised at the beginning of this session for you to think about, I may have collected data from other team members, but the messages are not about those people told me, because the immediate question is, who told you? I want to know who told you. That's not the issue. The issue is, based on the data, I have concluded, I think this. So it isn't others that are saying that. And don't ask questions that you don't want answers to. And don't ask rhetorical questions. I use this as an example. Why do you keep doing this over and over again? I don't want the answer to why you keep doing this over and over again. I want to help you not keep doing it over and over again. So questions might be clarifying questions, but don't ask rhetorical questions like that. In providing feedback, focus on behaviors that can change, because there's certainly some things that aren't going to change, that can't change. And you need to distinguish those that can change and cannot change. So, for example, Giving feedback like you need to be more attentive to detail is like saying to someone, be careful. Okay, I'll be more attentive to detail. I'll be careful. Those are so vague. But if you say, let me point out that in the report that you wrote last week, there were 3 points in time where you say very different things. They're inconsistent. I don't understand whether this is an issue of inattentiveness or what exactly the issue is. And so we're going to focus on this kind of concrete thing. Avoid in giving feedback judgments and being hostile, being snide, using feedback as a barb to stick it to someone. That's highly ineffective. So I use the example, a comment like, that's just plain rude. Rather, focus on describing the situation, describing what you see happened, describing why you see it is problematic. Now, you might want to then hear the individual's perceptions on this situation, or you might want to move into talking about solutions and approaches. You want to, as you go along, check out with the individual whether they're tracking with you. Are they hearing what you're saying? Does it make sense? Ask them what they understand you to be saying. These are active listening skills, and they're very important in the feedback process. And avoid vague threats. You keep doing that, you'll be in deep trouble, is an example of a vague threat. On the other hand, there may be situations where you want to be extremely clear about the consequences. And it may be to say, John, this is a warning. I am giving you a formal warning at this point in time. If this happens again, we will terminate you here in the department. Now, that's not a threat. That's a very clear and highly specified consequence of the same behavior or same occurrence happening. So there may be situations where that level of clarity is required. But if it is, don't be vague. Provide clear consequences. Skills that are important in providing feedback. One is to differentiate between fact and emotion and separate them out. Effective feedback does not suck you, the individual given feedback, into emotionality. It's also important to be balanced because no one's work is all bad or all brilliant. So have a balanced perspective. People can hear criticism much better if it is. Be focused and don't provide feedback on 20 different things at one moment in time. Again, feedback is an ongoing process. So address the most important and most pressing issue or issues. Avoid generalizations. You're always late, or you're always sloppy, or anything that says always in it, because that's probably not true. You might say, over the last month, I have seen you late to 6 meetings. That's different than to say you're always late. It's also different to say, John, there might be a reason once or twice for you to be late, but I cannot understand why every single time we have had meetings over the last 6 weeks, you haven't been on time. Is there an explanation that I don't understand? Pay attention to the physical setting and the proxemics. And proxemics are your position in physical space. So in my office, I have a couch and 2 chairs that are fairly comfortable chairs. And for many meetings, I sit in one of the chairs, and the person who, for one-on-one meetings, comes in and sits on the couch. And it is a fairly informal kind of setting. If I see the person very nervous, sitting very rigidly, I tend to slouch down more. If the person is very relaxed, but the message I want to give is you shouldn't be so relaxed, I'm going to physically sit up more and face that individual much more straight on. If, on the other hand, this is a meeting where I am troubled and want to give a message of a power hierarchy, then I do it totally differently. We don't sit on the couch. I don't sit in the chair. I sit at my desk, and the person sits across from me. Now, you may say, wow, but that's my office. My office has my desk, my chair, and then one or two chairs with a person sitting across from me. I would say, look for another space if you want to create an environment where it is much more collegial. Is there a small conference room that you can use then that has 4 chairs in it where the two of you can sit around a round table? Pay attention to the physical setting. Pay attention to your body language that is either aggressive or relaxed, that is sending messages, because people read all of the nonverbals very powerfully.